Hey y'all, and welcome back to my channel. I wanted to show you a way that you can use a simple little short book like this to dive into world history and a people study of all types of cultures and ethnicities, and how we can use this to create mini lessons or unit studies within your homeschool. So this is what I do. Of course, I like to read anything related to history that I give to my child, unless it's like if it's historical fiction, then I normally don't read it. But if it's historical nonfiction, I try to. But anything that is more of for the purpose of informing, like these types of books, I will definitely read it first. But what I like to do is read it first and then create a mini lesson. And this is how I would create a mini lesson. Let me just turn to, okay. So with this specific story, well, first of all, let me explain. This book does not give you a lot of details, does not give you a lot of meat, does not give you a lot of information. It just gives you a quick 1 page. It looks like it's maybe 3 paragraphs, sometimes 4 paragraphs of what took place during that time. So this is not to be used as a history lesson. I like to use this as a springboard to a unit study or a springboard to a mini lesson that I'm going to create, or as a springboard to introduce a particular topic that we're about to discuss within our homeschool. So here's what you can do. Here's an example. Also, you can use this to bring in studies of other races, cultures, ethnicities within your homeschool as well, if you're looking to do that. So in this case, the first transcontinental railroad, we would read this and then we would do some research. And then I would make sure, in terms of helping my son understand, that the United States was built by a lot of immigrants. It was built by slaves. It was built by a lot of non-Europeans. Although Europeans did build the country as well, but they weren't solo in that effort. A lot of the work, the labor, came from people who were non-European. And this is a great way to bring that in. So after we would read this, we would discuss how did we even get to the Transcontinental Railroad in terms of Reconstruction. We would talk about Reconstruction, and then we would talk about Chinese labor and about how that railroad is credited, for instance, with helping to open the West to migration and with expanding the American economy, and how that railroad system is actually blamed in many eyes for the near eradication of the Native Americans of the Great Plains and the decimation of the buffalo, and also exploitation of Chinese railroad workers. So you can dive in a lot and talk about various areas in terms of this one particular moment in time in history. We can also talk about the Central Pacific Railroad and how it barely remained solvent, and it was instead the Southern Pacific Railroad, which eventually took control of the Central Pacific Railroad, and that deserves credit for creating the economic expansion that was leveraged to monetize California produce. It's just so many things that we can dive into. You can also dive into other books. A book is called Railroaded, The Transcontinentals and the Making of the Modern America. You as the parent would read that type of stuff. So the whole point is, you as the parent, you may have to do some reading, some research in order to bring meat into the conversation. And then you can dive into other areas to include current events, to include how the railroad system impacted the economy and how the railroad system caused such a demise or a diminishing of the population of the indigenous people, the native people. You can show maps. You can create maps. You can have them draw a railroad system, create a railroad system, create a writing project of some sort. So there's so many things that you can do to bring this one particular time in history into, or bring it to life. We'll study the gold rush. We can talk a lot about this one particular topic from these 3 paragraphs. As you can see, I just gave you days or weeks of additional studies that you can do. For the smaller children, the littles, what we could do is maybe we can have them paint or draw or watercolor a railroad system. We would probably have them physically play with railroad tracks and talk through, as they're playing, talk about railroads being transportation and how transportation gets you from one place to another. And then we would talk about different people who played a role within that process. If you are in history and you are talking about, let's say you're talking about the colonization of Africa, this is a great way to start off that conversation or bring that conversation into play. You can talk about the Zulu War of South Africa, because, sometimes students or history makes it believe that, when colonizers came into the continent of Africa, that they took slaves from everywhere. But that's false. They took slaves, the majority of slaves, from the area of the continent that was close to the seas, because it was easier to get them on those boats and to ship. You can also talk about the fact that slaves weren't just docile. They didn't say, just take me. No, slaves fought. They fought so that colonizers don't come into their land and take what wasn't theirs, because they felt as though they had the right to do so. And then you can even talk about, slavery in the United States, that all slaves weren't just docile. They were not just okay with being enslaved, that they tried to get out of slavery. They tried not to be in bondage. And there are things called revolts that took place within the United States and outside of the United States that were successful, and some that were not successful. And then you can talk about that as well. So it's all about creating the right perspective and creating the right narrative when we're talking about history, and not learning and teaching U.S. history or world history from one lens, from the lens of what we like to say the oppressor, or the lens of the hunter. But you want to talk about history and things that took place from the lens of the oppressed, or the lens of the hunted. So the Spanish-American War, you can dive in deep there. So many things you can go and talk about there. But this, again, gives you wonderful starting points for all types of history, world history, not just African American, Asian, Hispanic, or European. It, I think, gives you a good mix of it all, but it's up to you to dive deeper, to talk about issues, and to talk about the good, bad, and the ugly. And again, depending on your student's age level, what grade they're in, that would of course determine what type of projects or discussions or research that you would have them further do. But I hope this video was of benefit. I hope this was helpful. I think this book has something about the Boston Tea Party. I'm not sure if it does. I don't see a table of contents, which I'm not sure why they would not do that. Why would they not put a table of contents? They did not do that. Let me see if there's some type of something, an index in the back. No. But if they did talk about the Boston Tea Party, that's a great way to bring in current events with what's happening with the protests now in the United States and around the world, also in other parts of the world. But the Boston Tea Party and those protests, Oh, what a great way to bring past history into current history. But okay, guys, let me stop talking. I hope you found this video to be of benefit and help, and hopefully it is helpful. As always, guys, be blessed and make it a great day. Bye.